Okay, another booktube tag. This one once again comes courtesy of Dane Reads, and I'll link below in the description to the video in which he tagged me. This is the second Tome Around tag. It's got 9 questions. I'll put all the questions in the description. Number 8 is optional. And starting with number 1. Do you buy secondhand books? The short answer is yes, sometimes. The longer answer is I'm in a bit of a unique position because I've been living abroad for most of my adult life. 8 years in Japan, 1 year in Australia, 4 years in Cambodia, going on 5 years now in Vietnam. And my access to English books and to secondhand English books has varied over the years depending on which place I've been living in. For example, in Japan, there weren't a lot of secondhand bookstores, at least for English books, at least in the areas I was living. In Phnom Penh, in Cambodia, there was actually a big expat community. There's a lot of NGO workers and various expatriates living in Phnom Penh, and so there were actually several secondhand bookstores that had English books. Right now in Vietnam, there's a couple places I can think of where I can go to find secondhand books, but not a lot, at least not a lot in my area. So it varies depending on where I'm living, but certainly if I have access to a secondhand bookstore, I love secondhand bookstores. You know, you never know what you're going to find in a secondhand bookstore. The other thing is Amazon as well. I haven't made use of Amazon recently, and by recently I guess most of the past 10 years. But I used to love Amazon for tracking down long out-of-print books to go along with my obscure interests. Like when I was really interested in the Paris Commune, I used to use Amazon to track down a bunch of old books about the Paris Commune. When I was interested in tracking down books about the French colonial period in Cambodia or Vietnam, I used Amazon to track down some of those old obscure books. So I've also used Amazon over the years. Anyways, number 2, what was your latest purchase? So the latest, I believe the latest one actually, is Second Language Acquisition by Susan Gass and Larry Selinker. Now, obviously, purchasing it is one thing, reading it is another, but it is on the TBR list. I found this in what is known as Book Street in Ho Chi Minh City, in which you can actually find some secondhand books. So, yeah, I guess you can find it in Vietnam. Number 3, what condition do you find acceptable, i.e. tatty or not tatty, etc.? Oh, tatty is no problem. The problem here I've discovered in Asia, and this has been true of Japan, Cambodia, and Vietnam, is moldy books become an issue. You know, because of the humidity, you often have books with all sorts of mold or splotches on the page. And I'm not bothered per se. I mean, I don't have an aesthetic problem with it, but I always wonder, is this going to be a hygiene issue, bringing a moldy book into my apartment? And so there have been 1 or 2 times when I found a moldy book in a used bookstore. I've just thought, yeah. And there was another time as well. There's a bookstore called D's Books in Cambodia. At least there used to be. I haven't been living in Phnom Penh for the past 5 years, but they had a policy. I don't know who was running it. All the books, the minimum price was $5, and $5 is a lot of money for Cambodia. But you know, if it's a book you're really interested in, it's worth it. I found, I believe it was Richard II by Shakespeare. I was going through this kick where I thought I was going to read the whole Henriade, not trilogy, what do you call it? Quadrilogy, 4 books. Anyways, I wanted the book. It was moldy. They wanted $5 for it. I said to the girl who was running it, I like this book, but I can't possibly pay $5 for a moldy book just on principle. But you know, she didn't have any, she just worked there. She didn't have any authority to negotiate with me. But yeah, I guess the short answer to the question is, if it's moldy, I tend to second guess it. If it's tattered, no problem. Although, as Dane Reed said in his book, if it's missing pages, that's a deal breaker, obviously. Number 4, after you have read said book, do you keep it or reread it or donate it? Yeah, again, this comes back to my unique situation in that I've been living abroad and making a lot of moves. And I've discovered that it is, when you make a move, especially when you move countries, it is impossible to take your library with you. You wouldn't think so because, a book, you think, well, a book, that's nothing, it weighs nothing, I pick it up. But you get a whole stack of books and it weighs a ton. And you can't possibly put them in suitcases and take them on the airplane with you. You'd be way over your weight limit. I didn't know this initially, but I discovered this very quickly. So anytime I move countries, or even when I move locations within a country, for example, when I was in Japan, I moved cities in Japan a few times. Yeah, you just have to get rid of all your books. There's nothing for it. I mean, maybe you can take 5 books with you, but that's pretty much about the limit. So I know people who are book lovers hate to get rid of books, but yeah, there's nothing for it really. What I've done instead is I keep a record of everything I read. I review everything I read on the blog and do a video review of it. And then that's my keepsake. The review is my keepsake of the book. I don't really tend to reread a lot of books anyways. And if I do reread a book, maybe it's 10 years later. And I figure if I really want it, I can track it down again on Amazon or something like that. And again, this is where it's nice to have the list of all the books I've read on the blog. So question, do you donate it? If there's a place to donate it, I donate it. Usually what happens is I'm in a panic because, it's the last minute and I have to clear out the apartment. More often than not, they get thrown away. But if I'm planning far enough ahead and if I can find a place that wants it, like when I was in the countryside in Japan, nobody wanted all these English books. Most of them just had to get thrown away. But if I can find a place that wants it, I'll donate it. Number 5, do you have a favorite place you go to when looking for secondhand books? Well, Amazon, obviously. And again, this depends on where I'm living. At the moment, living in Ho Chi Minh City, they've got a place called Book Street, which is opened up near the Notre Dame Cathedral. The Notre Dame Cathedral in Ho Chi Minh City, not the one in Paris, obviously. If you're living in Ho Chi Minh City, you know this street. So I go there. Ugh. Okay, number 6, hardback or paperback. Do you have a preference? No. No, not really. No preference. Number 7, have you found any real gems? Well, a few on Amazon, but I don't know if this counts because these are books I was specifically looking to track down. Like I had heard through the grapevine or read somewhere that this book was really useful, so I searched it on Amazon. In terms of books I just kind of stumbled upon browsing in the bookstore, I was looking through my list of book reviews over the years, and no. I found any number of books that were passable by browsing through the used bookstore, but no real special gems, no. Number 8, optional. Find a book from your shelf that you can donate to a good cause or local charity Goodwill shops. I'm going to pass on this because I'm living in Ho Chi Minh City right now. I don't know of any Goodwill shop that accepts English books. Although if I do find one, I've got plenty of books I need to clear out of my bookshelf. So, no. Number 9, go ahead and tag some peeps. I guess I'm going to tag. I've got a very small community here. The only people I actively follow are Dane Reeds, Graham Quigley, and Written in Blood. Written in Blood is a recent one. And Dane Reads is the one that tagged me. I guess the other two, if you haven't already done this, I'm tagging you right now.